we're back. Welcome back to the Sean Trey Show. I've got a really cool guest with me back. And would you tell everyone who you are, what you do?
I'm Tim Craven. I've been on here before as a guest talking about music production and the art of music production.
Yep.
But we've got some new topics to talk about today. So
We're diving into something.
I'll lend my
new.
best guess on this topic. No, actually, well, we can talk about it, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, we're going to dive into one of the things that I was thinking about is, so throughout my life, I am, when people ask what I do, there's a bunch of things that I can answer, you know. I am a video producer. I am a content creator. I am a singer. I sing with my wife sometimes, which is pretty wild. She's a professional singer. I get paid occasionally to go up on stage with her to suffer through a song, and I do it, and it's fun. You know, so a musician. I am a lot of different things that I do, a director, photographer, but I'm also a teacher. And one of my side hustles, side gigs that I've done for years is I've taught English when living in Asia because it pays me well. But yet I was always embarrassed to say it because it was like this thing that I did on the side to just make some extra money that was never my career. And yet I was like, always like, if my in-laws will introduce me to like, Sean, and I'm like, from 8 a.m. till like 9 p.m. at night, I am creating content for my wife and doing all this. And my in-laws will be like, yes, this is Sean, our son-in-law. He's a teacher. I'm like, come on, man.
Right.
Do that a couple hours a week, you know? It's like, but it's not a problem. But like, I was starting to think about side hustles. And when we met, you know, you were talking about music and all the awesome things that you do music. But then all of a sudden, you dropped this tidbit. Actually, you messaged me or you liked something from your other Instagram. And you have a second Instagram. And I was like, whoa, hey, hold on. This is interesting. So tell me, you know, you are a music producer. You do all of this awesome music stuff. But tell me about this other life. This other, you talk to Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
My side hustle.
Your side hustle, right? Which is an interesting word, you know?
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm hesitant to call it a side hustle because I take it very seriously and it's a passion of mine. So it's not really like a side hustle in the sense that like, you know, I'm driving, you know, for Grubhub or I'm doing Uber or something, those are all legitimate side hustles are great. I'm a fan of the side hustle. I think that it's smart, and if you have the time and the energy to do it, the more money is always more money, and more money equals more freedom. And so money is never equals happiness, but it buys freedom, and freedom is happiness. Yep. So in a roundabout way, that's how I view it. So I'm all about having options available to me, and having options available to me is created through financial avenues that create the freedom to have the options available to you. So I'm not against any side hustle. So, and I don't really call this a side hustle, but what I do have is my second life is I'm a real estate agent here in Nashville, Tennessee, and it's new to me. Real estate's not new to me as far as investing and buying homes and selling them and flipping them. I've done that for years. But actually being a licensed real estate broker or realtor, as I call it here in Nashville, is new to me. It was a part of the COVID fallout. You know, in the music industry, everything in Nashville shut down. Like I don't think people fully understand in other areas of the world, except maybe Los Angeles or New York, how the entertainment industry didn't just slow down. It stopped completely, and it's just now starting to recover from it. So during that time, another friend of mine who I've known since college, and we've been friends for years, is a successful touring musician and studio musician. And we both had a lot of time on our hands. And in March of 2020, April of 2020, nobody knew how long it was going to last. Yeah. And so we both have always been active in the real estate market. I'm on my 9th house. The house I'm in now is my 9th home that I've owned in my life, which is a little unusual. Most people don't own 9 homes in their lifetime. So I've always, when I was touring, I would buy a house, I would live in it, I would fix it up while I was on the road, and then sell it, which is called a flip. So, and then I would take the money that I made from the flip and live on it and reinvest it, buy another house, make it my primary residence, live there while I was touring, which was, 200 some odd days out of the year. And I'd have it fixed up, pull up the carpets, put in hardwood, blah, 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 flip it, make some money, and just kept doing that. My friend bought a house, did a complete reno on it. Like, he had a house, he bought a second house, renovated the house with the idea that he was going to move into it, sell his other house, which he did, and then expanded off the back of that house and made like a smaller guest house that he was going to use for Airbnb as a second stream of income. And that's what I like to refer to it as, is not necessarily a side hustle, but a second stream, multiple streams of income. Yes. I just think it's the way to go. I really think it's the way to go. I think it's a really smart way to go, whether it's passive income, active income, portfolio income, whatever it is, income. It's in the word. It's coming in. Yep. Instead of going out.
Yes.
So maximize your income, maximize your outgoing, or minimize your outgoing. So that's how we got into it, is we had kind of been doing it on our own. And he called me up and he's like, man, this is something that we've talked about for years, like doing. And it's something that we've been doing on our own as buyers and sellers and investors. He's like, we should just get our license while we have the time. And I was like, let's do it. So we got online. We took some online courses. It took us about, we took our time. It was like 3 months, 4 months. But by November, we both had passed our tests and we became fully licensed real estate agents in the state of Tennessee. And it has been outstanding and fun and exciting. And we've had a blast doing it. And we've helped a lot of people get from renting to ownership. And a lot of them are friends of ours who didn't think it was possible or didn't quite know the different avenues that they could take to get there, because they're like, oh, I don't have the down payment, or I don't have this, or I have too much of this, or I don't make enough money. And it's like, if there's a will, there's a way. And, I'm not a financial expert, and I don't know all the ins and outs, but I have a financial expert who does. And I'm like, call my guy, tell him your situation. He'll look at your situation and we'll get you pre-approved for whatever it is that you can get it pre-approved for. The thing is like, it may not be your dream home, but it's better than renting. So start building equity. That's the key.
There was a guy I knew in college, and this guy named John. John was a weird dude. Like, he was really weird. But like, and his dad was from like Eastern Europe or something. He was awesome. He was awesome. His dad was like from Eastern Europe, and everyone gave John just a hard time all the time. He was one of the cool guys. He smoked a ton of weed. And I'm pretty sure that he was probably the most prolific pot dealer on my campus in like the history of my university. But he took that business and he bought a car. And so everyone remembered him driving around this car. But John had the ability to flip things that was absolutely nuts. And so he bought this car, and I don't remember what it was, but it was something that was moderately vintage, and this is in the 90s. And then he cleaned it up a bit, sold it. And that really POS car, he didn't spend much money. He had got a nicer car, and then he cleaned that up, did a little bit of work on it, sold it, and at the end of the day, he took like something that was like a Honda Civic. And then eventually he had an Acura NSX. And it was literally like he didn't do anything besides putting a small amount of work in on these vehicles. There was no major structural work. He just was a smart person and knew how to sell stuff. And then he sold the car and invested in a house. And then the last I heard, the man was like just really, deep in the real estate sector. All started off from like a Honda Civic. And and then that's one of the things that you just said, like, people don't understand how something's possible until someone can help show the way, which is what I love about, real estate agents. And people, you're a guide. You're like the shaman of the...
Or the shepherd. I always say that. I'm like, every job I'm in, I'm like a shepherd.
Right.
That's how I got started. So, I was living in Philadelphia in the 90s. It was kind of a Renaissance town at the time. Really progressive mayor doing a lot of great things to try to turn Philadelphia around and make it like this amazing city that it already was, but really is now. It's like, on the level of like New York. It was always like the dirty stepbrother of New York City, or not quite as like, pristine as Boston. It was like, Philadelphia had that thing in the 70s, right? So Mayor Rendell was really progressive man, really smart man, and started doing these things where he wanted to rejuvenate the city. And the city had all of these old buildings that were either municipal buildings or they were used for different things that the city was using. Like, for instance, the building that I ended up buying in was the old Bridge Works building. So the city housed all of the people and all of the equipment and stuff they needed to maintain the bridges that connect Philadelphia to New Jersey, which is, if you know the area, that's a big deal. It's like the Ben Franklin, the Betsy Ross, and the Walt Whitman Bridge. 3 major bridges that connect, South Jersey to Philadelphia. Major thoroughfares, right? So it's a big deal. And then eventually they moved that stuff somewhere else, and they had these vacant buildings. And Rendell was like, look, we're going to incentivize developers to come in and redevelop these areas and make them residential buildings. So I don't know how I found out about that, but I really wanted to buy something, and it wasn't going to be a house because I couldn't afford it at the time. So it was like, how about a condo? And I was like, cool, I really want to live in Philly. I can't afford the rent in Philly. Like, I was living in Jersey at the time. I was like, I really want to live downtown in Philly. It's great, cool city. I came from Boston. I lived downtown in Boston. And I was like, but this rent is killing me. It's like so expensive, right? So I was like, I got to buy something. So I did some research and I found out about this program, and I went and I looked at these condominiums that were being built in this old Bridgeworks building, and they were awesome, dude. Exposed brick. They had like high ceilings. They were like lofts, like New York City style lofts,
That's awesome.
And they had this program where and it was incentivized through the city and the developer, where you didn't have to get a loan through a bank. You got a balloon mortgage, which they used to call balloon mortgages. I'm not sure what they call them now, maybe assumable mortgage. But essentially what it is you borrow the money from the developer, and in 5 years you have to refinance that loan into a conventional loan or another type of loan through a bank. So the developer makes the money, and then eventually a mortgage is assumed by somebody else. They called it a balloon mortgage at the time. It was $1,000 down, and you got the $1,000 back when you moved in and closed. So basically it was free. No money down, no money out of pocket. You had to have a certain credit report, a certain credit score, and they would lend you the money. And it was incentivized and backed by the city, because if they got a certain percentage of occupancy in these buildings, the city would then give them another chunk of money to go and do it with another building. So if the building reached like 95% occupancy, then they could re-up with the city to do another project. And that was the way it was working. So they were like really hustling to get people in these condos. And I got in, and it cost me like zero money. It was $1,000 up front. I got $1,000 back, and I moved into this 2-bedroom, 2-bath condominium, downtown Philadelphia, for basically no money out of pocket. And it was great. And my mortgage was actually less than what I would have been paying in rent had I rented a similar place in Philadelphia. So that was huge for me. So I was like, great, I'm going to buy this thing. I lived there for 5 years. And when it came time to refinance the loan, I was ready to move back over the river into a house. So I started looking for homes. I sold that, made a profit, took the money that I made from that, enrolled it, paid off the mortgage, obviously, whatever the profit was, rolled that into my house in New Jersey, got into a single family home in Jersey, fixed it up. It wasn't in great shape. Fixed it up, did all the kind of some basic stuff, painted it, put in some hardwood, but really, really took a lot of care and time in it. And I lived in that house for 3 years. I sold it, made another big profit, and then I moved to Nashville. So that's kind of how it started for me. And it didn't require a lot of money to do it. I mean, a lot of people I know were buying homes, and they were having to put down 15% and 20%. And I'm like, I don't have that cash. I need something that's going to be like an apartment, but then I can own it. And so it was fortunate and it was great. And that's kind of how it all started for me. And I just kept rolling profits into the next house, you know.
There was
Um,
Did you ever read the Robert Kiyosaki, I believe is his name, Rich Dad Poor Dad?
yeah.
Interesting book series, but like there's the essential, like his whole thing is, one of his fundamental principles is the difference between an asset and a liability. And like he's got other concepts in that book as well, but like that's one of the core concepts. And I think that this is something that I remember when we came up through high school, when I came up through high school, my high school, I was the last group of students that went through like general shop,
Mhm.
where I made a small cabinet, which I wish I could go back and make a cabinet again, because I think it probably would have been way more fun to do it now than it was then.
Right.
But the nail gun was ridiculously fun. I don't know how we didn't put an eye out, because we were literally
Wow, they
shooting
allowed
nails.
that.
Oh my God, we were shooting nails across the room. People were getting them in their legs and stuff. Yeah, not. It was not the big nail gun. It was just the little like tacks. But
Mhm.
still terrifying. But and the boys were in this general shop learning about electricity and a little bit about cars, and the girls were over doing what was it? They had like sewing and baking, and like my school was like probably a bit of an antiquated philosophy. So the next the class after me had a life skills, and they were still figuring it out, and they made all these kids carry what was it? Like my friend had to carry an egg around for a week or something, like it was his
Right.
child.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's like, oh man, I'm glad that egg wasn't a real child, because I would have, been arrested multiple times for absolutely forgetting where my child was at. But one of the things that I've come back to time and time again, because I did not grow up with any type of financial education. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
like even the most basic of concepts of like an asset versus a liability. And I see it with some family members, some like distant family members. I've got one person in my family that he he likes to buy things. And he constantly is buying stuff that doesn't in any way add value to anything. It's
Mhm.
just this expenditure, and it's like, and one of the things, and I'm not judging him, I do a little bit, but say I need to go out and buy a new phone. Phone could be an asset or could also be a liability, because for me, and I work in video, having a good phone that I can shoot on is actually an asset, but not
Mhm.
so if I'm buying the most expensive phone that is not necessary. Then it becomes a
Mhm.
loss of money. You know what I mean? And so
Mhm.
you have this balancing act between things that are actually can create equity for you in some way, shape, or form, and things that are. And one of the things that one of my friends is a financial person, and he always looks at me. He's like, "Just the one thing I tell you, Sean." I was like, "What? Don't ever buy a new car." And I was like, "What do you mean?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "You take it off the lot, and you've lost $10,000, right
That's
there."
right. Yeah. I've never
You
owned a
know,
new car. I've always bought used or certified used is really the way to go.
yeah,
And so you don't have to buy it. You can buy it from a dealer. You can get the warranties and the stuff. So I always look for like a certified used blank from whomever the dealer or manufacturer might be, and you save a lot of money. You can get more car for less money. You save the depreciation because it is used, and it just makes more sense. And you can usually probably get it. The other thing too, as I tell people, is like don't get sucked into this idea that it's smart to finance a car more than 36 months, and they'll
yeah,
offer it to you. And that's 72 months. Like, are you kidding me? Like, don't do that. I know your monthly payment is lower, but it's a really bad idea to finance it for that long, and never finance it beyond the limited warranty that comes with the car. So
right.
if it's a 60 or 60,000 mile warranty on the car, then your loan should not exceed that, and it definitely shouldn't even come close to it. So those are like little things that don't take financial expertise to try to kind of understand. So you see these 84-month, 72-month financing on cars, and I'm just like, the life of the car may not even be that. Like, that's ridiculous.
Right.
What you don't want is to be spending, my philosophy is I buy a car, I buy it used or certified used, and then I drive that thing till it stops driving.
Yep.
And if
That's what I told my wife.
I know.
That's one of the reasons I buy Toyota. One of the reasons I buy Toyota is because they go forever. And it's not just that. It's that when I had my last Toyota, when parts started going out on it and I was a poor graduate student, I would drive down to the wrecker, I'd pull the part, put it on my car, and kept going. And it was totally fine. Because
and that's important. I think that's a really important thing. And a lot of people, a car is a status thing, and I understand that. And people love their cars. In America, we love our cars. We love our fun cars, our big cars, all the things that are related to a car. And it's like part of our culture is that, your freedom and your independence and your liberties that are afforded to you in our Constitution have always been, it's this like nostalgic 50s thing. Like your car is your road to anywhere. You can go anywhere if you have a car.
Yeah.
It's like a reliable car and a full tank of gas, and the world it's unlimited. But so I get it, but I think it's like a cultural thing that the house I grew up in, my parents were teachers. We didn't have a lot of money, so I from day one, my mom used to work a budget every month. She had a spiral notebook, and she'd do it by hand, and she would balance our budget, our monthly budget down to like, the dime. And I would, we sat and watched her. She'd do it at the kitchen table, and she would be paying the bills, and she'd be balancing everything. And there wasn't a lot coming in. And, honestly, there probably wasn't a lot going out, but it was always it always seemed like a delicate balance. I mean, we always had the things that we needed and sometimes the things that we wanted, and we had a good childhood. But at the same time, like, that really instilled the idea of like, not spending what you don't have. And I think that's really key. That. And I fell prey to it when I was in my 20s, and I was having some early success in my career, and I was like, you want to get your cool toys and all the things, and I racked up some debt. I'll tell you what, I did. I did rack up some debt getting into my studio, building my studio, but I knew that over time it was a business. It was a business thing.
But that debt was. It was building an asset for you, something that was going to be able to create money.
Yeah, it was like a business expense, but it was kind of being done on a personal level. But I just think that there's a lot.
There were
there's
one
a
or
lot
two
of
things in there that were.
There still are. I won't lie to you. There still are. I'm always like, I need to get that pedal. But there are a lot of things that people can do that I think are smart ways to invest money, save money, and build wealth that are not hard to do. And, it's really funny, but something that I've leaned on multiple times in my life when I've needed like a little cash to either get a down payment to buy a house or needed a little cash to finance something, is a universal life insurance program. And it seems it's really benign. It's really benign, and it's really not sexy. It's not like buying Apple in the 90s or buying Tesla stock or buying Bitcoin or anything. But it's way smarter, and it's an insurance policy. It's a whole life insurance policy that has cash value over time. So the money that you put in and you pay it, you essentially accrue cash, and it ends up having a cash value. And I have on multiple occasions gone to my State Farm guy and sat down with him and said, what is my life insurance policy, my whole life, not a term life, it's a whole life insurance policy. What's the cash value in it right now? And he'll be like, 15 grand, 20 grand. And I'm like, great, I need 7 to do this. And you get the money out. It's your money. It's sitting there. I had no idea. I mean, the first time I went in there, it was like this like chunk of money. I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't even know I had that available to me. And I did. And what it did was it allowed me to make a purchase. I forget what it was for. I think it was for a down payment, like on a house or something. I forget what it was. But anyway, it allowed me to make a purchase that I didn't have to finance. And it was great. And it was just sitting there. And I bought this thing when I was like, 21. And I've tapped it, 2 or 3 times now for, $5 grand, $6 grand, $7 grand at a time. And it's been great. And they just cut you a check. And then the value of that cash value drops. And then as you continue to pay the premium, it starts to build back up again over time. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, and when you're 20, when you buy the policy when you're 20, it's like negligible amount of money. It's cheap because you're 20, and they're
Yeah.
like, when you buy a life insurance policy when you're 50, it's a little bit different, but when you're 20, you're young and they're going to give it to you and they're going to give it to you cheap. And what's great about that is time. So, that's the other thing I always try to tell people is time is really important. Get in early, do things early, start things early. Like even if it's like an Acorn account or a Robinhood account, they have these accounts. Like I do it for my kids, and just to have like a little bit of cushion somewhere, just because I think it's an interesting experience or experiment. I'm not basing my retirement on it, but it's just kind of fun to watch it grow and see how it grows. And what it does is I link my two major banks to it. My checking account, my business checking account, and my Amex card, which, by the way, I don't carry credit cards. I use an Amex card, and it's an old school charge card. And whatever you put on it, it has to be paid off that month. They
That's
do
awesome.
not allow you to carry a balance. And and there is pretty strict penalties if you carry the balance over. So what's great about that is you don't spend more than you can pay off at the end of the month. So recommend that American Express Gold Card for business people. Awesome, do it. It's great. It's really well protected. I've had my card hacked multiple times. They instantly shut it down. FedEx me a new card the next day. We're up and running. Like there's never been an interruption. That's a whole nother conversation. But something like Acorns or Robinhood is great. Like what it does is you attach your banks to it or these cards that you use to fill up your car with gas or buy groceries or whatever, and it'll round up. So if you spend $10.58, it rounds it up to 11, and then you can do multiples. So you can do like a 2 times roundup or a 3 times roundup, and then you can also each month dedicate a certain amount of money from your bank account to invest, like $50 a month, $100 a month, $200 a month, whatever you're comfortable with, and then they invest it. So you can select your portfolio, and you don't really get to choose. It's kind of an actively managed account by them, but you can decide if you want it to be aggressive, if you want it to be moderate, if you want it to be conservative, and then they kind of break it down what that is. There's a lot of like ETFs involved. There's some company, they buy ETFs, they buy like companies in different sectors, and then the more moderate one is they throw in some things that are a little more secure, like some Vanguard funds, and then the last one they're like, a lot of it is like in bonds and stuff that are super safe. So, but not much growth, So the higher the risk, the bigger the growth. The lower the risk, the slower the growth. You pick what's comfortable for you. But if you start young, and you do that, and it's happening in the background, you don't even know it's happening. It's like, it's just coming out of this account and it's rounding up from these things. And then they incentivize you. They have different like merchants that they use. So like if you buy Nike, they'll take whatever your purchase is and they'll put in 10% into your account, whatever your purchase is through the app. Blah, blah,
That's
blah.
awesome.
There's all sorts of cool stuff. But, if you're in your 20s or if you're 18, or if your parents hook it up for you and you're 6, then by the
Right.
time you're 25, you might have a nice little chunk of cash in there that you can use to start your life and do something like buy a car and not finance it, or put a down payment on a house or a condominium. You don't always have to buy a house. You can buy a condo. They're cheaper, they're smaller. If
Right.
you're young and you're single, it's better than renting. But think condo before you do an apartment, if you can. And so these are all like little things that can happen in the background. I mean, I'm doing whole life insurance policies for my kids right now and buying them when they're 1, 2 years old, and hoping
That's
that by the time they're 18 and 25, that they've got like a nice chunk of cash in there that if they needed to tap it, they could, and then they don't have to, whether it's for school or whatever, if they decide not to go to college, whatever, start a business, buy a house, buy a car, whatever it is, just it's theirs to do with what they want with. And it's cool. And I've got Acorn accounts for them, just whatever I can do to like just kind of like nestle this stuff away so that when they turn whatever age, 21, whatever the state of Tennessee is, I forget what it is, I think it's like 21, they've
Yeah.
got a little something, little jump start on life.
Well, there's you touched on something I love. I love the term the acorn, accounts, because it's just kind
Yeah.
of storing things away, and like it reminds me of the little squirrel,
Hmm.
that is just picking up the acorns and putting them away for when weather gets bad. And I think that like we live in a world that's way too safe at times, and we feel safe, and we're, like, granted, winter used to be the time where people and things died, and it would be like, if you didn't prepare, if you didn't salt the meats, if you didn't can the foods, and you didn't put in the work. I mean, I remember watching my grandma, canning fruit and canning other things, and it was because she remembered when there wasn't the stuff available. She remembered when there weren't fresh foods available in the supermarket. We have this 24/7, 365 day a year idea of access to everything. And the reality is I loved it and hated it. Was it last year or the year before? Whoever the genius was that ran that damn boat into the side of the Suez Canal and it shut down the global supply chain for a period of weeks.
Yeah.
It was nuts to see that suddenly people were like, we can't get this. Well, what? Zippers. Yeah, you can't get zippers right now. What do you mean you can't get zippers? Yeah, well, the supply chain isn't moving. And COVID did the same thing. It accentuated the idea of suddenly we were in this world where you couldn't get stuff. And for me, it was interesting because when we had our lockdown, I could get almost everything, but there were certain things you just could not. There are 3 different things that were really weird. I have animals, right? We have animals in our house. I have some leopard geckos, and I have some guinea pigs for my daughter, her guinea pigs. It was really freaking hard to get guinea pig food during COVID. Like, that was not an essential good. And, the pet store guy, I was able to get stuff, but it was like we were rationing the poor little guinea pigs. I'm like, hold on, little man. It's just going to be these 5 seeds today, And it's nuts. But like in our lives as adults, if we can instill in children this idea that it is good to put away a safety net, because whether you think there was this concept I put into one of my reels. I'm trying to tap into the TikTok generation.
I've noticed that. They're good. I like them. Yeah. Daily meditation.
It was one, but it was being prepared, right? A little bit like that. It was like a be prepared one. And it talked about how my friend Trey came on, and Trey is military. And he said there was one day where he was up in Afghanistan, and a group of Navy SEALs came through, and they were prepping for a mission. And Trey worked with, I think it was called the Night Stalkers. So the Navy SEALs were the forward operating combat, troops, and these guys were doing all the special forces stuff. Well, they need like transpo, and so the Night Stalkers were the helicopters that supported these guys. And so my friend worked with the helicopter crew, and he said there was one day that he remembered, like, these guys, and they were sitting there on the tarmac and pulled out duct tape, and they taped out the shape of the house that they were planning on going into, and they ran through this little map on the ground that was taped out in front of them. He said they ran through it like 100 plus times, and they were trying to anticipate every last possible negative scenario. And then, like, if you ever follow like some of the neo-Stoics, they have this premeditatio malorum, and it's like the idea of meditating on the bad things that can happen. And it's one of the meditation exercises that these guys do. You go back to the ancient guys like Marcus Aurelius and and all the other ancient Stoics. I can't remember them right now, but it's a concept that, do you prepare for bad things to happen? It's like, we live in a world of peace and love and everything we want. We had this period in the 2000s where everyone was like into The Secret, and hey, I'm all for good positive energy. I'm all for that, but we still should be preparing for bad things to happen.
Oh yeah,
and just preparing for.
My mom mom used to say all the time. She's like, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. That's where the best you can do. So I'm a blues man, so I'm eternally hopeful. But also at the same time, I understand that there are things that are outside of my control, and that was not made any more clear. Couldn't have been made any more clear during the pandemic and what happened with everything just kind of disappearing in what was a pretty comfortable ride up to that point. So, really did open up my eyes, and it really made me understand a lot of things. And for the most part, I was prepared for it. I wasn't anticipating it, and I wasn't hoping for it. And I wasn't meditating on it, but at the same time, I was able to navigate it in a successful way and come out kind of ahead in some ways and better in some ways. Not only not only in a financial standpoint, in business standpoint, but also in like a mental standpoint. Like it allowed me to discard some mental baggage. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm a firm believer of, I don't think people often think about it. And then sometimes they think about it. Yeah. They think about things like when you're young, you don't think about like, it's like, oh, that's for old people, or that's like, I'm not worried about what's going to happen when I'm 40. But man, before you know it, in a blink of an eye, you're 40. And if you haven't made the moves that you need to make to get to where you want to be, then you can be left behind. And in a hot, like for instance, in a hot real estate market in Nashville, there have been a lot of people who've been here for years, like people who've lived here their whole lives or been here for 20, 30 years that it just didn't move on the market early. And now they can't get in it because it's too hot and it's too expensive. And, it's unfortunate. And it's unfortunate because they have the unfortunate, at this point, it would be unfortunate ability to look behind them and say, man, if only in 1999 or 2001 I had purchased that house that I was renting instead of continuing to rent or just not thinking about it or not putting any focus on it. And, it's funny because my parents were always like pretty frugal. My mom definitely was, and my dad was too. And we just didn't have a lot. Like I said, my parents were teachers. Like I said, we weren't broke, we weren't terrible, but it wasn't like, we weren't rich by any stretch of the imagination. So we learned to be smart. My mom instilled in us that don't spend what you don't have, be careful what you spend, save your money, be smart with it. And my dad instilled in us is that when you do have something and you do have something nice, take care of it because the value lasts longer in it if you maintain it. So for instance, we used to wash the cars every Saturday before we could do anything else. It was help dad wash the cars. And we would not just wash the cars. We would detail those cars. We would vacuum them out. He had a whisk broom that we would like get all the dirt out of the car. I mean, that car, and he still to this day, when he trades in a car for a new car, the people that he trades in, they're like, whoa, like, what, did you ever drive this thing? He's like, yeah, I drove it every day, but he maintained it and it retains its value that way. And then I think that's something that not a lot of people, understand. And it's something simple like a car. Keep it clean, keep it running, change the oil, keep it going. Think about these things. This is an expense that you've incurred, and it's an important part of your life to have this. And eventually you're going to want to take this and sell it or trade it in towards something else. So try to maintain its value. And that was something that my dad grew up really poor. He grew up in Watts during the riots, and he didn't have a lot of money and they didn't have a lot of things. And, the one thing that he learned is that when he finally got something nice, like maintain it, keep it nice, don't neglect it, so that not only it retains the value for yourself, but it also retains its actual value so that you can like do something with it, trade up, which is what we all kind of are trying to do financially, is keep trading up for the next thing that gets you to the next level. And it was funny, my grandfather was an investment banker, and he was a cool guy, but he wasn't like, come sit on grandpa's knee and I'll give you some advice about like, life. But before he died, he did give me, as I got to be an adult in my teenage years, he gave me 3 pieces of advice that I still hold on to today. And he was an investment banker he was vice president of Union Bank in Los Angeles. And so some of this advice to a teenager, probably not the best advice, but there were a couple little nuggets in there that I was able to grab. First advice he told me was never admit to anything. And I was like, okay. Second piece of advice was never sign anything without an attorney present. And then he said the third piece of advice was when you can, buy, do not rent anything. Do not lease a car, do not rent a house. When you can buy it, buy it. And it doesn't have to be big and it doesn't have to be perfect, And it doesn't have to be the one that you're going to live in for the rest of your life or drive for the rest of your life, but buy it, own it. It's important. The ownership is important. That's how you can trade up. If you don't own it, you can't sell it. You can only give it back. And if you don't own it, and especially with a mortgage and with real estate, when you're renting, you're writing a check to somebody else and you're building somebody else's wealth. Yep. When you own it, and even if you have a mortgage, and that's scary for people. It's scary for people to think about, man, I'm gonna spend $400,000. I'm gonna be in debt for $400,000. It's like, it's not debt. It's debt, but it's not the same type of debt that you're thinking of as if you had $400,000 worth in credit card debt, right? So your mortgage is, you're building equity, you're building wealth. Every month when you write that check, it's going to you. It's going back to you.
Yes.
And that's what people don't understand. They think it's going to the bank, and it's like, no, it's going to you. It's going to you. And not only that, but not only are you paying down your mortgage and increasing what you actually own in the house, your house is appreciating with the market. And when you have a house, like and you live in it for 5 years and you build equity into it, your ability to use that house to borrow money against yourself instead of borrowing money from another person, it's incredible. It opens up all sorts of possibilities, And it all starts with that first house or condominium or whatever it might be, whether it's $150,000, $200,000 condominium, or it's a $500,000 or $600,000, $800,000 house. Whatever it might be, is that thing grows, you grow too. And so your options become available, like home equity line of credits, cash out refis. All of these things become available to you. And it's you borrowing money from yourself, from your future self, basically, in a way. So you can take out what you've already paid into the house, and you can borrow on the stuff that the market is saying the house is worth moving forward. So it's like, looks back and it also looks forward. And it's great. I mean, that allows you to go buy a second house, an investment property.
Yep.
And then you get into all the investment things, investment properties. You can flip that property. You can do what they call a BRRRR, which is an acronym that is BRRRR, which is buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat. And that's my partner. Yeah. My real estate partner is all about that. He loves it. I'm a flipper. I like to flip. I like to buy something cheap, put a little money into it, sell it really high, and extract the profit. He likes the BRRRR idea, where you buy something that's distressed, undervalued, under market, you renovate it, you get it ready to rent, you rent it, and rents right now are like ridiculously high. So you can get crazy rents, especially in Nashville. You rent it, then you take that asset that you have, you do a cash out refi. You take the cash on the refi because now the house is worth more because you've renovated it. You take the money back out and you buy another piece of property. And then before you know it,
and then you do the same thing.
You just keep doing it again. And then before you know it, you've got 4 or 5 rental properties and you haven't used any of your own money. I mean, you have used your own money, but you just keep taking the equity out of the properties that you have and rolling that back into another property to finance the rest of it, if that makes sense. That's like in a nutshell. Now, I'm not an expert on this stuff, so that's just kind of like a glossy oversight.
And I think that you touched on a couple things that I love, but one of the things is I think that I know some people get overwhelmed and they go, hey, where do I start?
Yeah.
And I think that, say someone doesn't know where to start. Where would you tell someone what are some things that people could do today just to get their finances back on track? What are some of the advice you'd give to someone?
Well, the 2 biggest things are making sure your debt to income ratio is low. And that is the ratio between how much money you have coming out and how much money you owe. And that's not like, we're not talking about your like monthly expenditures. We're talking about like student loans, credit card debt, those kinds of things like that are kind of revolving credit. So that's the first thing that a mortgage lender is going to look at. They're going to look at how much money do you have coming in, how much money do you have going out, and then that qualifies. And then what your credit score is, which is a whole nother conversation about things that people don't pay enough attention to that they should, is maintaining a good credit score. And there's lots of ways of doing that without opening credit cards. And a lot of people are like, well, I don't want a credit card, so I don't have a credit. And like, what people don't understand is no credit is actually kind of as much of a deterrent as bad credit. So if you have no credit, a bank looks at you like, okay, because your credit score is like, how we don't know you. How are you with your finances? This is kind of like your trust number. Like, can we trust you? Can we trust? Right. Are you a good lender? Are you a good borrower? Like, can we lend you this money knowing that this is going to be a solid, we're going to get our money back eventually and you're going to pay us. So those are things that people really need to pay attention to, and young people need to pay attention to. Is like, be careful of your credit score. Build good credit, and find ways to build good credit. There's lots of ways to do it that don't entail like having a credit card. So if a credit card scares you, don't do it. Finance a car. So term payments are different than revolving credit. They're looked at differently from lenders. Mm-hmm. So if you have a car and you want to borrow money to buy a car, it doesn't have to be a lot. Borrow $10,000 or $15,000, get a car loan. There is a monthly payment that doesn't change. It's usually a locked rate, and it's for a specific period of time. And again, I don't ever recommend going beyond 36 months for that. That's 3 years. So they know that like you're eventually, that loan is going like this, and it's a fixed amount of payment every month for a certain number of months, and the interest rate is factored into that payment. So it's not like a credit card where your minimum monthly payment really just covers the interest and it doesn't ever touch the principal, and so your debt just keeps rolling along, and you're paying $300 a month, and you're only or $200 or whatever it is, $200 a month, and you're never really reducing the amount that you owe. Whereas like a car loan works differently. So it's viewed differently when you come to lenders. And it's a great way to build credit. So if you're good with your payments and you make your payments on time and you do all the things that you're supposed to do, then do it. Other things that are great, if you do want to use a credit card, find something that allows you to do 0% financing for a specific time. So Sweetwater Music, I buy a lot of gear through Sweetwater Music.
I love Sweetwater.
The reason I do it is they give you free money when you finance the gear. It's free money. 24 months, 36 months, 0% financing. Like sometimes I just finance it because I don't want to take the money out of my bank account to buy the piece of gear. And I'm like, I've got the money. I'm just going to do the $100 a month payment for the next 24 months, and I'll pay it off in 2 years at $100 a month, and I'll get it for free. It's free money, 0% financing. It's a great way to build credit, So if you're consistent with that and you stay on track and you get it paid off at the end of the thing, that reflects positively on your credit score. And so those are like really smart ways you can do it without getting into a lot of like predatory kind of lending that is typical of banks and credit card companies, because that's how they make their money. I hesitate on saying predatory. That's a misnomer for what I'm describing. But those things are scary. I think it's easy to let those are easy things to get out of control. They can get away from you quickly, and you can find yourself like not getting ahead. So things that are like that are great ways to build credit. Credit score is super important. So getting started, I think that, as far as buying a house, I think what you need to do is you need to get with somebody who understands what you're trying to do, and be upfront with them, figure out what you can do, and do what you can do, but do it. A lot of people get glazed over and they get nervous about the process of doing it. They're like, I don't want to go to a bank and like reveal all my things and stuff. It's like, look, they're on your team. They're working for you. They're not working against you. So a lot of people are like, I'm not into that process. And I've over the last 2 years sought out an individual who I trust and is really kind and really aware of that process. So he's got a great bedside manner, and he doesn't make people feel like he's being like overly intrusive into their finances and then critical. That's the other thing, is people are like, I have a $700 a month car payment and I'm kind of embarrassed about it. It's like, it's okay. Maybe not the smartest thing in the world, but we'll figure it out, and let's find out what you can do, and let's get you into something that you can do comfortably. And, in 2 years, maybe you're in a different position. Maybe the market is booming. Maybe that little condo, that townhouse that you bought that you could afford at the time, now you've paid down your debt, or you don't have that car payment anymore, or you've done something, or you've built equity, and you can like maybe keep that townhouse as a rental, use that rental income to accentuate your income from your job, because you can do that. You can show that rental income as possible income. So now if you can rent that place for $2,000 a month and you're only paying $1,500 a month on it, you have now a $500 profit that you can show towards your income that now puts you maybe in a different position to borrow a certain amount of money going forward into your next house, or you can sell that property. Maybe it's gone up 75 grand. You can pull that 75 grand out, roll that into your new property, and now you've got more spending money or more ability to buy, stronger buying ability on the other end. Those are some pretty simple, easy ways to get into it, but it all starts with, really guarding your credit score, making sure that that's right, saving money when you can, and figuring out ways to get into a house with as little money out of pocket. I'm a big fan of that. That's what I did. Like back in the day, before the 2008 crash and a lot of the regulations, it was like the Wild West. You could do 100% financed loans. You could borrow 80% at one interest rate, do a conventional loan 80-20 at one interest rate, borrow another 20% at a different interest rate, which qualified as your down payment on the other loan. And then you could take all of your closing costs and roll those into the payment as well. So like I was buying homes, zero money out of pocket. As long as,
that's awesome.
Yeah, and the only thing, the key to it is making sure that whatever that number ended up being at the bottom line, where you take this and you take this and you take this, and you just roll it all in there so you don't pay any cash out of pocket. If you can afford that, that's the key. If you can afford that, then you can do it. Don't spend what you can't afford. So I would find a house that I could do that on, and I'd calculate that bottom line with my lender. And if I could afford that monthly payment comfortably, then I could buy that house with no money out of pocket. There's ways to do that now. And there's also lots of things where you don't have to put 20% down. You can put 3% down. There's tons of programs, at least in the state of Tennessee, for first-time home buyers. They'll grant you money, or they'll give you a specific type of term on your rate. It just takes a little bit of digging, a little bit of understanding. I try to send people links to websites that they can research and stuff like that a lot. Like I work with a lot of people who are first-time home buyers that don't think it's possible. And I'm like, it's possible. Like, first question is, what are you paying in rent right now? Like, well, I'm paying like $2,000. I'm like, if you're paying $2,000 a month in rent, you can afford a mortgage. Like, trust me, you can do it. It may not be your dream house. You may not be able to buy the house that you're renting right now, but you can buy something. And then the next time you write that $2,000 check at the end of the month for your now mortgage,
it's going to
in 5 years, you're going to really be happy that you did that. And it's not really going to cost you anything more. It may cost you some money out of your pocket for a down payment. So start saving for that. Think about those things. Those are the things, like when you start getting your first job, start thinking about those things. Don't think about the cool car that you can buy, or the killer TV that you're going to get, or the killer home theater that you can set up, or whatever your kink is at the time, whatever you're into. Be thinking about what can I do to start saving some money so I can start building some wealth, and one of the best ways to do that is to buy a home, buy real estate. It's gonna, it's never gonna, it does go down. It's never not gonna go down, but it'll bounce back. It's less risky than the stock market. So it goes up and down. It's gonna ebb, it's gonna flow, but the general course is up. And I tell people like that all the time too, that are like, how did you, when I talk to bands, they always ask me about investing. We always end up on a conversation about investments. And I always tell them, it's like, look, man, your first $10,000 or $15,000 that you invest in the stock market, invest it conservatively. And that can be your base. Like, don't take $5,000 and try to chase down some, crazy stock that might be having like a run, or don't try to chase down something like Bitcoin with the idea that it's going to pop and you're going to become an instant millionaire. That's like, you might as well just take that $5,000 and buy lottery tickets. Do that.
Right.
It's like, it's the chances of it happening are there. And I like where your head's at with the excitement of the risk, but that's next. Take your first 10 or 15, 20 grand, buy ETFs, buy the major indices, buy SPY, buy QQQ, buy DIA, put the money in that, let it grow. And then once you've got a nice foundation, then you can start to go and chase individual stocks. But, don't get ahead of yourself until you're there. Like, because it's just going to be disappointment. You're going to get disappointed, then you're going to get discouraged, and then you're going to get out of the headspace of like, this is something that's important for me, so.
This is why I wanted to create this new series and focus for my podcast, because coming back to the idea of financial literacy, I talked before about how I'm a martial artist, and when you start playing around with different techniques, you start off with the level 1, level 2, level 3. Like, if I started doing black belt techniques when I was a white belt, I'm going to get hurt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
oh yeah,
you're going to get really hurt because you don't have the basic understanding of what you're doing. And I feel like I wish that there was a black belt system for finance. Like level 1 techniques, boom, and this is what it is, and this is the stuff you learn for level 1, level 2, level 3. We have that for other areas, but I just don't feel like it's there,
Well, it's definitely not, and I think it's definitely not stressed enough, I think, in school. We're really consumed with the idea of like math and science is really important, but honestly, like I occasionally, I think the most I use is like now, maybe I use a little geometry, maybe I use some algebra. I'm glad that I have it, but I'll tell you what I never use is my chemistry or my physics. I mean, it's cool and I dig it, but man, I'll tell you what I use every day would have been economics. My economics class that I took, I use that every day. And it's funny because like, I'm able to, and I wish I had gone further with that. And a lot of people do that study economics or business. They get into that, but it's not something that you really get your feet wet in high school anymore. Like we had an economics class, an economics teacher, and I reference a lot of that stuff. Even simple concepts like supply and demand. Like I hear all the time people talking about the national real estate market and the market, as on a more macro level in the United States, this is a bubble, it's going to burst. It's like 2008. And I'm like, that's not the case. It's like 2008 was completely different. That was people borrowing money that they couldn't afford to pay back, essentially was the way that, and banks willing to lend to people that had bad credit or couldn't afford the loans that were being lent. And they shouldn't be doing that, and they shouldn't do that. It doesn't benefit anyone, and except for them in the short term, and it all fell apart. But what we're looking at now, from my assessment, for what I can see, is just basic supply and demand. There is low supply, there's high demand, that drives the prices up. So you can, people are often in Nashville, the market the last 2 years has been ridiculous. Like people are paying 50, 35, 50, 100 grand over ask. They're waiving appraisals. Yeah, they're waiving like appraisals. They're waiving inspections. Things that you would never think to do. And they're doing it because it's so competitive. And in order for them to get the house, they have to give up a lot. And homes are getting 11, 12, 15 offers on them. A lot of them are cash buyers. So it's really been competitive. Now that's slowed down considerably in the last couple of months, but it's kind of like it's just it's funny because it's like people are like, I'm worried about spending this much money, and I'm like, I know you are, and you should be, and that's smart, but this market is solid. Like this home is going, and the thing is the homes are appraising, and that's the key. The key is that the house has to appraise, because then, like, if you offer $35,000 over, let's say that house is listed at $400,000 and you offer $450,000, just to use numbers, that you have to offer up cash. It's called an appraisal gap. Yeah. And so you have to prove that you have $50,000 to spread the difference between the $400,000 that's being asked and the $450,000 that's being offered. And the seller wants to see that you have the cash to cover that, because they're going to assume that the house is going to appraise at $400,000. But what we've been seeing is that the homes have been appraising closer to the $450,000, if not at the $450,000. So the buyers are putting up the cash for this gap, but the homes are appraising, which means the house is valued by the lender, the bank, at the price that they're paying for it, which is crucial to having a sustainable market where the home values are increasing, but they're not creating a bubble. They're actually increasing, and they're being appraised at this price. So now you've got this new bar that's up here. So this $400,000 house is now, in the eyes of a lender, worth 450, and that's how it grows. And it's supply and demand that's driving that market that way. It's not like it's not something that would be considered not sustainable or not like like able to qualify in some way that the market, as far as the lenders and everybody's involved, can put their head around and say this house is actually worth that, so people aren't getting upside down in their mortgages because the homes are appraising. So I always just tell people, I'm like, just if you want it, go for it, and do it, and it'll catch up, or it'll end up there. You'll be fully financed, or it'll catch up. Trust me. Like Nashville market, I think is appreciating between like 13 and 15% a year. So when you start adding that to the value of your house, that's a lot. That's a lot, and that's fast. So lots of things to think about.
And again, it's like you said, just get in, find ways to get your feet in there. Mm-hmm. Finding ways to, because I'm sure that if you look around and you figure things out, there is a will. And a way,
and the other thing too is that when things appreciate that quickly, the smart move I think is to put less money down and then refinance in 2 years and get rid of like your PMI and stuff. And once you get that 20% equity in your house, refinance it with that 20% equity, and then your monthly mortgage will go down because you'll be able to get rid of your mortgage insurance, which is what is required until you meet 20% equity in your house. So if the house is appreciating at 15%, put 5% down. And then, in theory, in a year, you'll be able to refinance, or 2 years, and you'll be able to structure your monthly payment lower. And if interest rates stay the same, then, that's a win. And it's great. Yeah. Get your house reappraised, prove that you have 20% equity, and now your wealth is just increased. Just like that.
Again, it's money. It's money. Yeah. Well, man, we need to keep this series going, and if you want to come back on, and maybe I'll get some other people that we can interview together.
I'm not and my disclaimer that I was given to you before is I'm not an expert at finances. I do sell real estate, I do make records, and I do a lot of this. A lot of this is my kind of own guerrilla style.
But you've made smart decisions. You've made smart moves, and that in and of itself is something to. And that's what I think. I was seeking out people on Instagram and like these Instagram financial experts. There's this gap between people that need financial literacy and people that are, like really crushing at investing. And like, there is this level of people like that. Most people are somewhere in here, people who are just getting their finances figured out, and people who are growing things actively. Obviously up here you get your Warren Buffett and you're real people, that are making moves, but most people are kind of somewhere in this range. And again, I think it's about educating people, and and being willing to learn if you don't have that education.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that there's a lot of little things that you can do on a very DIY level, which is what I've done and it's really through discovery. Like I said, getting back to that life insurance policy, I had no idea.
Yeah, right. Who knew?
I didn't know until I got one when I was like 21, and I'm like, okay, cool. This sounds like, I was like, I should get some life insurance. This sounds like a smart thing to do. And then when I was like looking for cash to finance something, or I forget, was to make an investment or something, and I was like, I don't want to have to finance this amount of money. Like, I wonder where can I go to get some cash? Like, I'm looking at my portfolio, I'm looking at different things, assets that I could do to sell, maybe whatever to raise this cash. And it came to I just snapped. I was like, oh my God, I've got this life insurance policy that's been for the last 20 years accruing a cash value. That is mine. It's mine. It's my money. Like, nobody else, I'm not borrowing it from State Farm. I don't have to pay taxes on it. I don't think I had to pay taxes. Maybe I had to claim it as income. I'd have to check on that, but it's there. I've just been building it kind of in the background. I didn't even realize it. And it was great. It was a game changer. It allowed me to do what I wanted to do, and didn't have to incur any debt because of it, so. little stuff like
That's a
that.
big deal. Well, brother, I really
Yeah, man, no
appreciate
worries. I hope
I
I
appreciate
didn't
it, man.
talk
I
too much.
appreciate this information. But
Yeah.
no. It's awesome. I just feel like what I'm feeling like is that we're opening a can of worms that needs to be further looked at. And I think that, and I just, for myself, I want to learn as much as I can so that I can create a better, a nest of protection for my little
Yeah.
one, and do the right thing by
And
her.
once you
So
do it and you see the results, it clicks and you're like, well, this is cool. I dig this. I can act. This is good. This is good stuff. But it does take the commitment of like trying of doing it and then getting to the end result and then
yeah,
realizing not only is this good for me, but I can repeat this. It's
yeah,
repeatable. So much in life is not repeatable.
right,
There are definitely certain things that you can,
right.
there's certain things that you can learn and be like, this is actually a repeatable process that I can continue to grow. So.